I'm making this video to explain a change I'm going to make in the game. So, to start off with, I want to make sure it doesn't sound too arbitrary and just explain that in general, I make a bunch of changes, not just they're all planned, you know. It's I have an opinion and an understanding of things until I get a new one, and these things they take a few iterations to stabilize. And that's only when they're really stable can you start building on top of it. And this is one of those things where I started out making the game only for high level language programmers, really. Or maybe your advanced Factorio uh, player, someone like that, like very technical person with an interest in how do these computers actually work. And I wanted to tell all these interesting stories from within computer architecture. How does these very simple basic components give rise to full complicated architectures? How does instruction sets and architectures relate to assembly? You know, and also smaller stories like how do function calls work and all this stuff. However, as I released the game, I realized there's a lot of hobbyists as well who like to play the game. Many of them are educators or professionals. Um, so some of them, though, are really turned off by some of the decisions I made to simplify the the very casual player's first entry into the topic, right? Throughout development, actually, my biggest problem has always been making it simpler, easier, cutting complexity, and so I never focused on anything that I didn't think was interesting. And you know, some of the electronics details were not interesting to me, and frankly, still are not that interesting to me. But I know that I've noticed or I've heard, been told a bunch that some of the details really turn them off. Well, to me, it's details, right? And that's the whole point. To me, it's details, so I should just change them. And as an example of what I've done is I I was told again and again that you know, if you have, for example, a NOT gate in the middle of your circuit and it's not connected, then how come it's having an on output? Well, that was because at the time all things were either on or off according to the logic at the time. And if you're not connected, you're off. So the input was off, and therefore the output was on. It's completely rational and airtight logically. But I think it doesn't really matter to people either way. So it was easy to change. Now you have to connect things to input. Um, and this made the game perhaps 0.1% more complicated. But it satisfied a lot of people. The thing is, I don't want the game to be about electronics details, but I want someone with this sort of more hobbyist um, experience to to open the game and not feel alienated. Because another thing is, the game looks like the board looks like electronics, right? And I don't think the game really shines until later. So you present it with something you think is electronics and you think the rules are wrong, and then I think the game is really strong when you start having a built-in assembler with step debugging, and you have a component factory with nested components, and you know, you have online scoring and all these things, assembly challenges. But they don't see that at the beginning. So I want to change that. And another thing, actually, I also want it to be useful for educators, and they have a very high standard in terms of correctness. It can't just be teaching you something, but then they have to keep reminding the students to ignore a certain part of it. That doesn't really work for them, I think. So the game will never ever be about electronics, but I feel like there's a minimum bar, a sort of checklist that we just have to get to that point in order to not alienate a certain group of people. And a, a second thing I did was adding SR ledges. And I feel like people might also have thought that was completely random. And I didn't want to tell people at the time the rationale for it, because I feel like they would have figured out what I was going to announce now um, beforehand. And the idea with the SR ledges is that you will start the game for the first time and you will get the option to turn them on or off. It will say if you're a casual player and this is your first entry into this topic, it's highly recommended that you pick this option. And if not, you can pick the SR ledges. SR ledges are really actually a little bit awkward in the simulation engine because the engine made some I'm using some tricks to get speed, and for those, because of those tricks, the delay line is really the most obvious memory component. Anyways, the change I really want to talk about now is the fact that if you have two components outputting on the same wire, it should cause a short circuit in case one of them is on and the other is off. And of course, this means you cannot have free OR. You cannot have free OR gates. And that means it breaks basically all the optimal scores in the whole game, which really sucks. And what I want to do is I want to change this on the 31st. And on the 31st, I will download all the scores and I will give the 500 highest scores, I will give them a permanent badge on their profile. There will be more badges in the future. But this badge you will never be able to earn ever again. It will say season 0 and then your rank at that point in time. And so I hope that can alleviate a little bit of the pain, because after the 31st it will then be a new scoring system. It will be realistic scoring. And I also want to address another critique that I know, and it's valid as well, but a lot of people prefer challenges where you cannot just find the solution on Wikipedia. However, I do think there is something to being able to find the solutions on Wikipedia. It means it's from real life. It's a something you could use in real life, but you lose that being the first to explore a new logic kind of experience. I do think though that this is only a valid criticism in terms of the components. As soon as you go into architecture levels, you're not gonna find an optimized maze solver as an ASIC on Wikipedia. And I also don't think it's a very important criticism, because in the future we'll have so much more content. So basically, I recognize that, but I think it's worth doing. And so, yeah, all I can say is like I hope I'm not upsetting too many people. Right after this, there will be a lot of new stuff coming out. So, yeah, we just have to do this.